Hi everyone, and happy Independence Day. My name is Ranger Leah. I'm a park ranger at Kings Mountain National Military Park. I hope that you're having an enjoyable holiday. You're joining me here in my backyard where I'm surrounded by my trees and shrubs decked out in their full summer greenery. Today we celebrate the document that shouted our desire for freedom to the world, the Declaration of Independence. This document emerged from the turbulent tempest of 1776 and articulated what we believed as a nation and the reasons for our actions. The words contained within the Declaration of Independence changed the world. In a series of 3 videos, let's explore how the colonists got to a desire for independence, the document itself, and why it matters. First, as we delve into our exploration of the Declaration of Independence, let's answer this question. How did the colonists get to a desire for independence?
The first catalyst for independence comes in the aftermath of the French and Indian War, which took place from 1754 to 1763, in which Great Britain fights France for control of North America. You can see here some depictions of the fighting during the war, with colonial militia, British redcoats, and Native Americans. Britain emerges victorious, but they run up a huge war debt in the process, one of the largest war debts in history up to that point. The British believed that the American colonists should help to pay down the debt, since the war had been fought partly to protect them, especially the frontier settlements. So Parliament, with the support of King George III, whose portrait we saw earlier, levies taxes on the colonies. The 1764 Sugar Act places a tax on molasses. The 1765 Stamp Act places a tax on public documents, playing cards, newspapers, and pamphlets. The emblem here was the colonist response, the skull and crossbones, and text reading, an emblem of the effects of the stamp. Oh, the fatal stamp. The 1767 Townshend Acts placed taxes on paint, tea, glass, and paper, and the 1773 Tea Act places a tax on tea. The colonist problem was not with the taxes themselves necessarily. It is the fact that Parliament levies the taxes without their consent. They have no representatives in Parliament to lobby for their interests. Thus you get the saying, no taxation without representation. The second catalyst for independence occurs in this same flurry of parliamentary acts, when that body passes the 1765 Quartering Act. This act makes the colonies responsible for providing housing for British troops in barracks and unoccupied public buildings. Now, the majority of colonists immigrate from the United Kingdom, which had a tradition of wariness towards standing armies. It is connected to the belief that a standing army invites an overthrow of civilian government and will lead to military rule. They carry this wariness with them when they immigrate, and here are British troops stationed side by side with them in their cities and towns. In reaction to colonist protests against the Townshend Acts, some of which descend into violence, the royal governor of Massachusetts requests that the mother country send troops to occupy Boston to protect royal officials and maintain order. So in 1768, Britain sends 4,000 soldiers to occupy the city. The arrival of their ships is depicted in this painting. It is like pouring gasoline on a fire. The colonists react to all of these parliamentary actions, some with acts of rebellion. They respond to the 1765 Stamp Act with boycotts and unrest. Some colonists formally create the Sons of Liberty, which organizes public protests and demonstrations. The crowds hang stamp collectors and other royal officials in effigy, as seen in the illustration here. Sometimes the protests turn violent. In October, representatives from 9 colonies meet in New York in a Stamp Act Congress, where they draft a Declaration of Rights and Grievances and send it to King George and Parliament. When the Townshend Acts are passed in 1767, the colonists react again with more boycotts and more unrest. This is when British troops occupy Boston. Colonists and British soldiers living side by side, competing for employment, creates an untenable situation. A large crowd of unruly colonists confronts a small party of British soldiers on the night of March 5, 1770. When the crowd starts to throw snowballs and other small objects, the soldiers fire into the crowd, killing 5 American colonists. Silversmith Paul Revere designs an engraving of the incident, which he calls the Boston Massacre. The name sticks. Tensions continue to smolder. In response to the 1773 Tea Act, the Boston Sons of Liberty disguise themselves as Mohawk Indians and dump 3 shipfuls of British tea into Boston Harbor, as depicted in the bottom painting. The incident becomes known as the Boston Tea Party. King George III and Parliament are absolutely furious, and their response shows. In 1774, Parliament passes a series of 4 acts that they call the Coercive Acts. The colonists call them the Intolerable Acts. These acts close the port of Boston until the colonists pay for the tea that has been destroyed. They revoke Massachusetts' colonial charter and place the colony under the direct control of the British government. Nearly all positions in the colonial government will be appointed by the governor, Parliament, or the king. Other colonies fear that Parliament will change their governments on a whim, that they will be treated the same way. In response, representatives from 12 of the 13 colonies meet in Philadelphia in September 1774 in the First Continental Congress. The illustration here by Alan Cox shows Patrick Henry, the famed orator, speaking to his fellow delegates in this assembly. They passed resolutions for Massachusetts to operate independently, but they also drafted a Declaration of Rights to explain to King George and Parliament their grievances. War seems imminent in the beginning of 1775, and when British General Thomas Gage sends troops from Boston into the countryside to seize a stockpile of colonists' arms and ammunition on April 19, 1775, colonial militiamen, known as Minutemen, resist, and the first battles of the Revolutionary War break out at Lexington and Concord. You can see an artist's depiction of those first shots exchanged between colonists and British soldiers on Lexington Green here. Even after first blood is spilled, there is uncertainty if the fighting's purpose is reconciliation with Great Britain or independence. In the summer of 1776, the Second Continental Congress begins debating independence, and they appoint a committee of 5 to draft a document telling the world why they want independence. Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Robert Livingston, and Roger Sherman. You can see their portraits here. The men discuss what the document will look like, and Thomas Jefferson writes it. After nearly a month of debate, committee work, and editing, delegates vote to accept the Declaration of Independence on July 4, 1776, after voting in favor of independence on July 2nd.